Well, good morning. In my last video, you'll recall I was making trivets. And I was having trouble indexing the trivets so that when I made my cuts, they were spaced exactly 3/4 of an inch. My trivet pieces are 3/4 wide, and I was having trouble doing that and being able to keep it straight with the as I moved it around. And I came up with this little device to index off of. You know, you like that, then you make another cut. You know, so it didn't work out. It didn't work out. When I mounted it on my dado table, as you can see here, why the problem was getting it attached. Underneath it's not smooth. I couldn't clamp it. I tried taping it. I did everything I could, but it just wouldn't hold. And when I'd bring this back like this, I had so far to move, it was difficult to get it to stay stable in all that movement. So it didn't work out very well. So when I made my cuts across the board, and the board was about 6 inches wide, why I couldn't hold it straight and my cuts were crooked. So come up with a better idea and let me show you what I did. First thing you need to do is to cut two little boards about like this, about 4, 5, 6 inches long, exactly 3/4 of an inch wide. And this little board, if you'll look here, is exactly 3/4 of an inch. You need two pieces like that. So you need to set your table saw fence exactly 3/4 of an inch from your saw blade. Now, I got an Incra set up, as you can probably see, and I've adjusted it where it's exactly 3/4 of an inch when I measure 3/4 of an inch out here on the fence. If you don't have a system, if you're using the old, the one that came with your table saw, it may not be that accurate. And so what you need to do here is take your gauge, find the sawtooth blade that points towards the fence, and then measure over 3/4 of an inch. Bring your fence up to it, lock her down, so that you've got exactly 3/4 of an inch. If it's off just a little bit, it won't work as well. In fact, it won't work probably at all. Okay, once you get those two pieces made, you come back over here to your dado table. You take one piece, bring your blade up, put it against the blade, and you put the other piece right next to it, and this piece is taped down with double stick tape. So now you got the blade at 3/4 of an inch exactly. Let me get my gauge. You got exactly 3/4 of an inch there. Then you got exactly 3/4 of an inch from the blade to this board when you put this in there like that. And then this board, of course, is 3/4 of an inch wide. Now your first cut, you run it like that. Let me square this piece off, and I'll do a couple of test cuts there to show you. So what we're going to do, the first piece we'll bring up here, and we'll put it right against that board. That board's solid. We'll run it through, and then we'll move it over into that next slot and run it through again. But the first thing you got to do, you got to set the depth on this, and you need to. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to make smooth trivets, well, then you need to set the depth at exactly half the thickness of the wood. My wife, she doesn't like smooth ones. She likes them where there's a little, where they're not half and they kind of stick up. She thinks they look better that way than they do smooth. So that'd be less than half, depending on how much you want it to stick up. So need to do that. I'll get a gauge here. Now the board I'm using is 3/4 of an inch thick, so I need to set my gauge at 3/8. That's if you want to make it smooth. Now she doesn't like hers smooth, so I'm going to drop it back down a little bit, and she probably wants it to stick up a 1/16 of an inch, so I need to drop it down a 32nd. Okay, there it is, a 32nd off of 3/8. Now why a 32nd? Because a 32nd on each board makes a total of a 1/16 of an inch. Okay, here's my board that I'm going to be making them out of. Now, the thing you want to do is the leading edge here, you want to make sure that it's perfectly square. Now, I use machinist squares for squares. I don't use a combination square, and because they're solid and they're usually very accurate. And as you can see, this board is perfectly square. Now I'll turn it around and I'll do the other end, and I want to make sure that leading edge is square as well. And you'll see I've got a little X marked on what's the leading edge. Now I'm sure it's square the other way. It is as well, but I like to know which is the leading edge. Accuracy is the key here. It is the key element. If all your measurements aren't as close to perfect as you can get them, well then when you go to put these pieces together, by the time you get over here, why, it's going to be so far off that it's not only not going to be square, but it's hard to get the other pieces in. In fact, sometimes they don't even fit. Okay, so let's get to cutting here. It's going to get noisy, but I want to show you how this is done. Right against this board. Now we're going to put the slot on the index. Okay, the other thing I didn't tell you, you got to make sure that your miter gauge is square with the saw. Now I already had that done, so I didn't have to worry about it. But this has to be perfectly square. If not, why, it'll bind as you go across. All right, let's keep cutting. The next thing we've got to do is cut this off. So now we need to get over here exactly 3/4 of an inch. We'll cut that off. Now I haven't moved my fence since I measured 3/4. So that now when I cut the other way, when I cut these pieces loose, they're exactly 3/4 of an inch wide. The same dimension as the slots, okay? So let's get to cutting. All right, let's see what we got. All right, there we go. Now it's just a matter of, I got to cut that off. Just a matter of gluing it up. Once it's glued, you need to square all these ends. And you can make your pieces one of two ways. You can glue the pieces all the way across, fortify these little corners. Or you can put your pieces like this and then cut across the corner here. If you're going to do this, you got to make sure these are absolutely square and they're the same length. And all you do on that is find a square side, put it up against your fence, and trim off all the way around, making sure it's perfectly square. So I'm going to glue this up, and then I'll get back with you when it's dry. Make sure it's square across there, square as you can get it. Okay, looks square both ways. And we'll just let that set up and dry. Okay, I had some little pieces of cherry scraps that I thought it'd be a good contrast to put on the edges. You notice I didn't make this one square. You have to cut another one off, but this is just for demonstration purposes anyway. And I've squared off the ends here all the way around. And now all I'm going to do is glue these pieces on and probably pin nail them a little bit. So I'm going to do that next. Now the ends here don't have to be, because are even, because we're going to cut them off at a 45. And you don't have to pin those. You could glue them and clamp them, but you know, it's just a trivet. Depends on how perfect you want to get. Okay, I'm going to set this at a 45. And the idea is to go across these corners here, cut them off at a 45-degree angle. Get my headgear on. I can't stand the screaming of the saw. I've got a laser beam to know exactly where to cut. Yeah, I don't know how about, yeah, there you go. You can see I cut that off at a 45. Now I'll just go on around and do the rest. Well, there you have it. The trivet. Looks a lot like that one, except it's oblong. You can make them any size you want. You can make them as little as this, 2 by 2. This one's 3 by 3, 4 by 4, and this one's 4 by 5. So make them any way you want. All it's left to do now is a little sanding, put a finish on it. I don't know, I've not used polyurethane or anything like that. I'm using linseed oil. I'm not sure if you put a hot plate on there, if the polyurethane would melt and make a mess or not. But I'm going to sand this now and stain it, and that's it. Remember now, the key is the indexing and getting your dimensions as perfect as you can make them, and make all your cuts, of course, absolutely square, and you're ready to go. Well, I hope you found this interesting. If you did, why, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, whatever you can do to satisfy YouTube that we got a channel worth watching. And I appreciate you looking, and it's been snowing here like crazy. We had 13 inches of snow. We're setting records in Arkansas, and we had a record cold. Got down to almost 0, about 5 degrees. That's Fahrenheit. So it's been a good week to get down here and do something like this. So hey, again, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the rebound. Bye now.